2 sine of x over 4. How do I graph that? What do I need to do first? 2, period. The amplitude is 2, the period is what?
8 pi.
8 pi. So to graph this, I would make 8 pi my fourth tick mark. My height would be 2. Are we getting pretty good at these? Let's say over 2 periods, so I need to get backwards. Forwards. Any questions about that? Then I ask you some questions that are not trig related, kind of leading into what we're doing today. How has x minus 3 squared plus 4 been transformed from x squared?
Up 4 to the right 3.
Up 4 and right 3. You can probably guess from this question what we're going to be doing today. No, it's a little bit more trig functions. Very similar, but a little different. Okay, so next I'm going to ask you to factor out a 2. Just for fun. And what do you get if you factor out a 2? 2 times x. The next one takes a little more thought. What do you get if you factor out a half?
1 half x minus 2.
How did you get the 8?
Multiply it by 2.
When you factor it out, aren't you dividing it out? It's the opposite of distributing. So you're dividing by the 1 half. We're going to need that skill today. Today we are going to graph things with horizontal shifts, vertical shifts, and period and amplitude changes. The horizontal translation, the horizontal shift in a trig function is called a phase shift. Just a new vocabulary word, it's the exact same thing that you learned in Algebra 2. In Algebra 2, you learned that the only way you can get the horizontal shift is by factoring out this b. Is that what y'all did in Algebra 2? Don't factor that out. Already factored out? Never factored out. So, I think you have. I think I made that work. Not the sign part, but the middle part where you had a b in front. So anyway, we're going to graph things in that form today. What do you think the C does?
Moves it up and down.
Moves it up and down, and what do you think the D does?
Left and
Right, left, and what's weird about the D? It's opposite of the way you would think it would move, just like Algebra 2. Okay, so to graph something in that form, the first thing we're going to do is find the period of amplitude. Always. The second thing we're going to do is use translation for the graph, left and right, up and down to move the graph. I would do the horizontal translation first and then the vertical one. This got it out of the book. It looks like it does the other one. I would horizontally transform because that's the harder thing to do, and then up and down is a little easier. C units. They just called that C instead of that. On the last slide. No, it's this way. Okay. Okay, so C. No, yeah.
Don't you see?
Okay. So I want to graph this over 1 period. The hard thing about this is not the thought process. The thought process is identical to what you did in Algebra 2. The hard thing about it is a lot of times we're working with fractions of pi, and figuring out how far to move in fractions of pi can get a little tricky sometimes. So you probably need to see a couple of examples through. Maybe not a ton, but you probably need to see a couple. Okay. The first two aren't too bad. So I want to graph sine of x plus 3/4. Before I actually graph it, what does the 3 pi over 4 do? Moves it to the left, 3 pi over 4. So this one's one, there's only one thing going on, so we'll start there. I'm going to graph an original sine function first. If this is on your homework and you graph an original sine function before you move it, make sure that after you move the function, you label which one's the answer. question asked me to move it left 3 pi over 4. That's where it gets a little tricky because I need to know how far is that. So that's where I'm going to have to go find out how far is each one of my tick marks, right? Well, what's this? Pi. And this is... I'm moving pi over 4s. So where is that actually? Halfway. So I'm going to actually add some tick marks in here. And you will have to do that a lot. And how many of those tick marks left do I need to move it? Three, and it is left, because remember it's opposite. So I need to move it 3 tick marks left. You see why? That's the only reason it's a little harder in trig because of the numbers that you're moving. But does everyone see how that works? You're going to find what a tick mark means, and this tick mark is pi over 4, and I want to move left 3 pi over 4s. So I'm going to move left 3 tick marks. And if you're on homework, let me know that the green ones are answered. If you can do it without drawing the original, you don't have to do that, and that's fine. There will be some you'll want to draw more than one graph, some of the ones that get trickier. Any questions about that one? The next one does have an amplitude change. And it has a phase shift. The first thing I'm always going to deal with, and that's why I taught it first, the first thing you're always going to deal with is period and amplitude changes. So I'm going to take care of that before I ever start shifting something right. This does have a normal period, but instead of being at 0, 2 when I start, this cosine graph is at -0, -2. Is it okay if you have to draw the first one and then flip? That's fine. If you draw 3 graphs, that's wonderful. If you can draw it without the original, then flip, that's good too. Both are great. This one's tough because I'm moving pi over 3 units. I'm going to show you how I do this, and you can do it differently if you would like. But pi over 3, I'm gonna think in common denominators. I already said this was pi over 2, right? Pi over 2 and pi over 3, what would their common denominator be? Pi over 6. And how would I break down the pi over 2 to have pi over 6? How would I get that to? I would divide it into 3 pieces. So when I go back and add more tick marks, I'm going to add 3 parts to each one. Does that make sense? So I've now made my tick marks pi over 6 units. Does that make sense? So I'm going to get a common denominator. That way it's easy to move. Otherwise you're guesstimating. Which, will I ever know the difference? Probably not, but this way it kind of helps you know exactly how far I'm moving. So I'm going pi over 3 units to the right. These are pi over 6. So how many pi over 6 is pi over 3? 2 of them. So I'm going to pick it up and move it to the right. I am picking hard ones to do in class. A lot of times they're easy because they're the same amount as the tick marks already are labeled. So I'm doing some hard ones.
got me
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, down there.
Okay. Back to yes. Okay, so the 2x minus pi is not quite in the right format to just see the phase shift. Does that make sense? Because it was supposed to be factored out, so you can see why I made you do that on the over. So I'm going to factor out the 2. What would be left if I do that?
X minus.
So now I can easily see the phase shift. It's moved right. Does that make sense? Okay. So the first two things I'm always going to find are
Amplitude and period.
period and amplitude. So the amplitude and the period of period. Pi. Where'd you get pi?
2 pi divided by 2.
2 pi divided by 2. Where did the 2 come from that you're dividing by? It's always the number in front of the x. Either place, factored out, not factored out, but it's that number in front of the x, and that's what you'll divide by. And then I'm also going to move right pi over 2. So I'm going to sketch the graph before I move it right, and then I'm going to go move it right. If you can do it all at once, that's great. I would love to see that extra step in there. That would be beautiful. Alright, so cosine 1.5 is where it starts. My fork tick mark is pi. So I start up at 1.5, down to 0, down to negative 1.5, 0, and 1.5. Any questions about that so far? Now I'm going to pick it up and move it right pi over 2. This one's, remember I was telling you the last two were hard ones, so I wanted you to see some hard ones. Why is this one much easier?
Because we already have it pi over 2.
Pi over 2 is already just 2 tick marks, so I can just move it 2 tick marks to the right. I don't have to put in extra tick marks. I don't have to make common denominators or anything. You like that. Just pick it up. Any questions? Am I done? It says 2 periods. So I need to do 2 periods. Always check that at some point when you're graphing. Now there are 2 ways to do the 2 periods. One is the red graph. I could have just gone ahead and done the 2 periods at that point. And then pick those points up and move it right 2 tick marks.
Homework and stuff, do you want us to label it?
Yes, with a period. You're going to have to label those. Now, you don't have to label every tick mark, enough that I know what the tick marks mean. And the Y, if you're counting by anything other than 1, then you'd want to label that also. If you're counting by 1, well, it's 2. That much. Which ones I've already moved, which ones I haven't. Oh, that's what it is. Any questions about that? Okay, let's look at the next one. And the next one is a little bit tricky. Some textbooks do this. I'm not sure why they do it, but it seems to get students a lot. It probably happens enough for 2 sometimes. Why do I say this is a little bit of a tricky one? The fourth and change, a period change, a phase shift, and a vertical shift. So we've got a lot of stuff going on. So I'm going to mental note the amplitude is 2. What's the period? You do. Does not change the period though. 2 pi over 3. Always 2 pi divided by the number in front of the x. You're right though, to see anything else, since I also have to, don't forget about the reflection. To see the other shifting, I am going to have to factor it out, put it in a critical form. And would you agree that would be pi over 3? So I am moving up 4 and right pi over 3. So this one has everything going on. Question so far? So I'm going to sketch it with the amplitude period and the reflection first. It is a sine graph. Two periods. If you notice, oh, you start, that's nice. Graph 2 periods. Starts at 0. It is a negative sine graph, so I go down instead of up. Remember, I am totally okay if you draw it unflipped and then flip it if you want to see that reflection happen on your paper. This piece has already been reflected and the period's changed to amplitude. Any questions so far? I normally will probably do the shifting all in one step, go right and up at the same time. But on this one, just for first time's sake, I'm going to do it separate. So I'm going to go right first, and then I'm going to move up. It is, to me, a little easier to move left and right first because you're already sitting on the x-axis, and it's easier to count over when you're sitting on the x-axis. Once you get up or down off the x-axis, it gets a little harder to count those 3 marks. Pi over 3. How many tick marks is that? Why is it 2? That's 2 pi over 3. Half of 2 pi over 3 would be pi over 3. So it turns out that each one of my tick marks, 5, 6, if I were to find each individual tick mark, there would be half pi over 3. So it's easy to move if it was pi over 6 or pi over 3 because of the way it ended up. So I'm going to move it right 2 tick marks. And then I'm going to move it up 4 tick marks. Any questions so far? I'm going to move it up 4 tick marks. I highly recommend, that's 2, that when you move it up 4 tick marks, you take the center line and move it up 4 tick marks first and draw a dotted line. Highly, highly recommend that you do that. It'll just kind of keep you on, does that make sense? Keep you on track on all the center points. Especially if you're moving right and up at the same time, it's a good way to kind of keep track of where you're supposed to go. So this point was on the center line, so it will still be on the center line when I move it up. I don't think it helps, you wouldn't have to do it, but I do think it's helpful. This one, move it up 4, ends up being 2 units down. The amplitude didn't change. Center line goes back to center line. This one goes up to 2. This one goes back to the center line. Down 2 units from the center line. Back to the center and 2 units up from the center. So the green graph is your plot. So that one was a tough one because it had everything going on. How was it?
All right.
Okay? Any questions? One more example. I got Philip about it. Okay?
Good.
You know what your homework is. It's actually not due until Tuesday because I do think today's a harder day. So I thought I'd do Monday to ask questions. We'll probably go ahead and start the next lesson on Monday, but you do have a little bit of a leeway day. There's 9 problems, which is a lot of problems for this type of. It'll take you a little while to draft 9 problems, so I got 2 days. I try to do half of them tonight and do the other half Monday. Okay, what's the first thing you would do? Rearrange it by the amplitude period. I like both of those things could be first, either or. Those need to be the first 2 things you do. If you said rearrange it first, the first thing I would do is factor out the 2. What would this be if I factor out a 2? Pi over 4. Does everyone agree with pi over 4? Why pi over 4? It's your divide, right? So if we do pi over 2 divided by 2, I would get pi over 4. Any questions so far? The amplitude is 2, the period is, what is the period? There is no reflection. I'm moving left, pi over 4, down 3. This one doesn't say where to graph from and to. I'm going to talk a little bit about that as I graph this one. I'm just going to start with 2 periods. Okay, so on this one I'm going to start 0, 0. This is pi units here. Pay attention when you're graphing how far you're moving up and down. Why do I say pay attention to how far you're moving up and down? That way you make your y-axis. If you're moving up 10 units, you might need to count by something other than 1.